Hart? No. Councillor Thomas?
Present.
Councillor Tenpe?
Present.
Also joining us today, and I ask them to answer to their names, please, are Councillors Cortell?
Present.
Councillor Gray?
Present.
Councillor Madeley?
Present.
Councillor Prochak?
Present.
And Councillor Vine Hall.
Present.
We also have officers present. Malcolm Johnson, the Executive Director.
Present, Chairman.
Dr. Tony Leonard,
Present,
Executive
Chairman.
Director.
Sorry.
Robin Venard, Assistant Director Resources.
Present.
Richard Parker Harding, Head of Service Environmental Services, Licensing and Community Safety.
Present, Chairman.
There are also 2 technical staff in the meeting to operate the live broadcast and to be on hand if there are any technical difficulties, and that's Claire and Kieran. The Democratic Services Officer, that's to say our committee clerk today, is Louise Hollingsworth. Members of the committee will be making the decisions today by a named vote. Louise will call out each member in turn, and they will either answer for, against, or abstain. Members, please remember to turn on your microphone again at this point. Because of the new format, members are encouraged to make their comments succinct and pertinent to ensure the smooth running of the meeting. Those members who wish to speak, please indicate by typing your surname only in the chat facility. The chat facility is persistent in that it cannot be deleted, and any inappropriate use would be deemed as a potential code of conduct matter. Officers wishing to respond to members' questions, please type interject. I will ask members who have asked a question if they wish to come back after receiving a response, so there's no need to type your surname into the chat facility again. It is a requirement that all members will have read the paperwork published on the website. Members are reminded not to press leave meeting if you need to leave the room. Just remember to turn off your cameras and microphones. Please be aware that there can be a time delay of around 5 seconds whilst a member appears on screen. Each item will be reintroduced as we get to it. And at this point, I hand over to Malcolm Johnson to deal with the election of Chairman and Vice Chairman.
Councillor, can I just say, Councillor Curtis is also present.
Did I miss him? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Thank you. And I apologise to Councillor Curtis.
Thank you, Councillor. So dealing with item 1, election of chairman, do I have nominations for the election of chairman for the municipal year?
Chair, Councillor Coleman, I'd like to propose Councillor Meir for chairman. I think the role requires a certain sort of legal brain and experience, and I think Councillor Meir embodies both of those qualities.
Thank you, Councillor Coleman. Do I have a seconder for that?
Second.
That was okay. Thank you very much. That was Councillor Thomas, I think. Sorry. Do I have any other nominations? That being the case, Councillor Meir, I'm delighted to confirm that you are chairman of Licensing and General Purposes Committee. So I shall pass back to you.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for your kind words, and I shall do my best during the course of this coming year. Yes, agenda item number 2 is election of vice chairman, and for vice chairman I would propose Councillor Coleman. Do we have a seconder?
Second.
Councillor Madeley seconds. Are there any other nominations?
I would like to second the nomination for Vice Chairman of Councillor Coleman.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any other nominations? If there are no other nominations, I declare that Councillor Coleman is elected Vice Chair, and I congratulate him on his appointment and look forward to working with him. Thank you. Agenda item number 3 is to resolve that the minutes of the last meeting be confirmed as a correct record of proceedings to be signed by me as chairman at a later date. Does everybody agree? All agreed, none against? If there are none against, then there is no need for a recorded vote, and that will be taken as passed. Thank you. Agenda item number 4. Louise, are there any apologies for absence or substitutes?
Yes, Chairman, we have apologies from Andy Eaton, Deputy Legal Services Manager, Maria Benford, the Human Resources Manager, and as Councillor Mrs Earl Williams has come off the committee, we have a vacancy, and Councillor Madeley is in attendance as substitute member for that vacancy.
Thank you, Louise. That brings us to agenda item number 5. Are there any additional agenda items?
Chairman, there are none.
Thank you. We then move to item 6, disclosure of interests. Members, please speak clearly if you have a personal and prejudicial interest, and say the agenda item to which it refers. Are there any declarations of interest? There are none. The only matter I would raise is that it's not a declaration of interest, but item number 9, dealing with officers' pay. I note that members' allowances are linked to officers' pay at present, and so that could affect us all. Agenda item number 7 is the appointment of members to the General Licensing Panel and Taxi and Private Hire Licensing Panel. And those names are as printed on the agenda, with the exception of Councillor Earl Williams, who has come off the committee. I think, Louise, we have to take a vote on this. Is that right?
Yes, please.
So,
Okay, councillors, I will call your names out alphabetically. Please respond with for, against, abstain. Once your name has been called, switch on your microphone only to vote. If you do not answer after your name has been called twice or contact is lost, members will be recorded as abstaining. Councillor Bird.
For.
Councillor Brown.
For.
Councillor Byrne.
For.
Councillor Coleman.
For.
Councillor Curtis.
For.
Councillor Field.
For.
Councillor Harmer.
For.
Councillor Madeley.
For.
Councillor Mear.
for.
Councillor Thomas.
For.
And Councillor Tempe. Councillor Tempe?
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I was muted for some reason.
I take that was 4.
Is that 4?
Yes, 4, sorry.
So that's unanimous.
So that is carried, and those members are elected to those panels. Agenda item number 8. I will hand over to Richard Parker Harding, Head of Service, to introduce his report, which deals with temporary street closure orders.
Thank you, Chairman. This matter was deferred from your last meeting, which now seems a lifetime ago. This report concerns our ability to make road closure orders for public celebrations under the Town Police Orders Act 1847. The crucial thing about this act is that these events shouldn't be for private gain, and there must generally be a public event. The reason why we are proposing that we actually adopt a policy on this matter is so that we can exclude those events which are really for private profit. And although they may pretend to be collecting some money for charity, in reality, very little money actually does go to charity. So the principle behind this policy is that at least 50% of the money raised should be going to a charity. At the last meeting, obviously members raised concerns that there were community events which went on in their particular wards which would be ruled out by this policy, and therefore we contacted members and we got together a list of community events which should be still subject to a road closure order, and that list is within paragraph 8 of your report. We've tried to therefore include all the events which happen at the moment, and also similar events which may happen in the future will be also covered by that policy. To be clear then, the policy will be that in all cases, as is now, applicants will pay a fee of £100 except the Remembrance Day services, and we will only approve events if they are 50% of the money raised goes for charity, except if the police are requiring a road to be closed as part of an event management plan, or as I say, it's one of the events which is on the list in paragraph 8. The other conditions we will make to making road closures orders is that there must be an adequate event management plan. There must be some plan in place for litter picking after the event, so that any exceptional litter is removed. And also there is adequate public liability insurance, which is all that we ask for at the moment. So the only real change in terms of our practical procedures is this requirement that 50% of the money raised goes to charity, unless it's one of the events which is on the list. That's my introduction. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. I see some councillors have questions. Can I call Councillor Tempe first?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Hello, Richard. Thank you for putting this together. I'm struggling with the fact that in number 3, we say events must not be promoted for private gain. And then we go over to say that unless if an event doesn't fall into the definition that you've listed, orders will be made if they do 50% to charity. Well, that means to me that they're making a private profit. So it doesn't make any sense. That it contradicts number 3. And also in the risk assessment, we say road closures are not doing so for private gain. So could you explain to me how we can possibly have a policy that says what it says there about 50%, which means to me they're making a profit, and then in number 3 and in the risk assessment they're not supposed to be making private gain?
I think yes. Obviously, the whole idea of the policy is that it shouldn't be for private gain, but the only way we can judge that really is by saying that a certain percentage of the money raised is going to charity. And previously it was felt fair that at least 50% of the money raised should go to charity. And in that way, obviously some of the money raised does sort of pay for expenses which are incurred in operating the event. Obviously, members, if they wish, could increase the 50% to a higher percentage, but I think we found on balance that 50% was a fair amount of percentage to go to charity, and it also aligns with our policy on street collections and house-to-house collections, again, where we really require 50% of the money to go to charity, because accepting that some of the money raised goes to expenses in operating the activity.
But that's different, isn't it? Obviously, you have expenses for any event, but this reads to me that you might have expenses, you might then make some profit, but only 50% of what you've made has to go to the charity, which again contradicts number 3 and the risk assessment. So I would rather see that come out.
Yeah.
So I would propose that, Mr. Chairman.
Can I perhaps, I'll make a quick suggestion, but perhaps what a way forward might be to say that any money which is carried over, the other 50% has to be invested in the next year's event. I think, is that the perhaps reasoning behind it, Mr. Parker Harding?
Yes, you're absolutely correct. Yes, obviously part of the reasoning is that what these events organisers have to do is they have to carry over a certain amount of money so they can organise the next year's event. So they'll retain that for their own benefit rather than give it to all the money going to charity. It's a fine balance between people having enough money to run the event year after year, especially some years they may not make a particularly large amount of money, and us making sure that when we issue these orders that the reasoning behind the legislation in the first place is it should be for a public event of money going to charity rather than going to private gain.
I wonder if the minutes, Councillor Timpey, if the minutes were to reflect what Mr. Parker Harding has just said, would that satisfy you?
No, because it doesn't cover the fact that we're still going to accept and give road closures for private gain. But if the rest of the committee feel that they want to go with your suggestion, then that's fine. But I would rather see it come out.
How would you amend the proposal?
I would leave it. I wouldn't even have that particular paragraph in there.
Which one?
For events not falling within this definition, and ending that this will apply, so that you simply have the list and then applicants must provide an adequate event management plan. So
the whole of the first bullet point on the second page.
That's correct.
Yes. Well, perhaps when we come to vote, we will see if we can accommodate that. I'd like to call Councillor Harmer now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for your report, Richard. My question is this. I'm the chair of an organisation in Little Common which replaces the business association, which sadly closed down just before lockdown. And this new organisation is called Friends of Little Common, and it's a not-for-profit organisation. And all the money, not just 50%, goes back into the organisation to pay for things like the flowers in the summer and the Christmas lights, blah, blah, blah. So my question would be, would this not-for-profit organisation also be okay, because we're not a charity?
The definition we've used in the past of a charity is fairly wide. What we talk about is a registered charity or a local charity. So it's something which is recognised locally as being of charitable purposes, which that your association would be. That would be included within the definition.
Thanks. That answers my question. We have had the road closed before, historically, about 3 years ago, a small section of it for the Christmas parade. Thank you.
Thank you. And I call Councillor Field.
Yes, thank you. I'm just checking that this table in paragraph 8 of the events which fall slightly outside isn't a definitive list, because I'm rather hoping that as the economic recovery group gets together and as we work out how to help the district regenerate, there'll be many other community events happening in roads to bring communities together and to aid development. So I'm just checking that the flexibility is there to allow this. You're nodding.
Yes, that's why we refer to similar events. So it's the list of as it is at the moment. If a similar type of event comes along in the future, then it'll be incorporated.
Yes, it's in the wording there. The road closure facilitates a cultural or community event as listed below, or a similar type event. And Mr. Parker Harding and I did discuss this in the run up to the meeting, and I think that's fairly clear to us now.
Thought that was the case, just wanted to be absolutely certain.
Quite right. Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Chairman. This is really in support of legitimate expenses, and I think we could then have a list of legitimate expenses, and legitimate expenses would include money held over for similar events next year. So I think, as I say, something like legitimate expenses and a table to follow would do it, but certainly just being able to keep 50% of what you've raised is not on, I think.
Mr. Parker-Harding, do you think you could accommodate that if we were to delete that bullet point and put in that legitimate expenses only are allowed to include an amount to facilitate the next year's event?
Yes, I would suggest we actually fix a carryover amount, though, or otherwise it will become quite difficult for officers to know how much carryover is allowed. We could then have some event organisers having a very large carryover year after year.
It depends rather on the size of the event, doesn't it? Some might be very large events which need a lot of money carried over. I think there is an element of discretion in this, isn't there? These are principles and policies.
Yes.
Well, if we said the reasonable costs of holding the next year's event, would that satisfy councillors? And you, Mr. Parker-Harding? Yeah,
yes, I think if we said that the carryover effectively will be the same amount of money it cost them to hold the event that year, you carry over that cost to next year, but no more than that.
That'd be fine for me.
Councillor,
I would like to. Yeah, that would be fine as long as it's open book and they can actually prove that.
Yes, obviously we have to. The first year people run events, we have to take them on trust. It's only
fair enough. I understand that.
Yes, thank you. I have Councillor Coleman wishing to speak.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Only, I guess, to play devil's advocate a little bit. I mean, I'm not known for my support of private financial gain, certainly. But as a sort of query, I guess, say there were to be someone or a company or a group of people who had this amazing idea for an event that they wanted to put on somewhere, and rather it was absolutely revolutionary. Everyone was like, this sounds like the kind of event that will bring people into Rother, that will make our businesses and our economy thrive. It's a sort of like once in a lifetime event that we've never seen before, but they were only going to do it if they could make some profit from it. They were more than happy to give 50% or maybe more to charity, but they wanted to make some profit from it. Would we as a council want to exclude them from putting on that event in our district, purely because they want to make some profit from it, which from a sort of corporate perspective could be a legitimate reason, I guess. But I would just maybe
large covered the point, but I do look forward to the event that Councillor Coleman is envisaging and as to what it will actually look like. But there's your challenge, Councillor. I mean, I think one of the issues with this is that, I mean, we do know that certain time when people run events in the first couple of years, it takes a while to get, to get some money behind them, and that can be an issue. So I think the issue, and I think it's actually reinforcing Councillor Coleman's point, is there may be merit in allowing people to carry money forward. What we don't want is people carrying excessive amounts of money forward year in and year out. So I think, I mean, if members are happy that there is a degree of flexibility that where, I don't know, that the majority of the money that is raised in an event will go to charity, unless it is towards running expenses or reasonable expenses. Not particularly succinctly worded, Chairman, I accept, but I'm sort of doing it on the hoof. But I think we do need to acknowledge that sometimes events cost money for a couple of years and might make money in subsequent years, and we wouldn't want to exclude those sort of events as a matter of course.
No, I think the intention. I think the intention has been thus far that these should be non-profit making events, at least taken over a period of years.
So I also point out that obviously, if there's any matters which don't fall within the policy, then it will be referred to this committee for determination. It's just really for officers just need some guidance. But if there's any applications that fall outside that guidance, it will come to you for decision.
I think that's very helpful. That does give us a discretion should officers not be able to interpret this, or they're not sure as to how we would go. It can come to the committee. I think unless Councillor Drayson would like to speak, and then I think we're getting towards, I think, a resolution of this. Councillor Drayson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think Mr. Park-Harding just touched on it. I was going to say, when Formula One want to contact Councillor Coleman and run the Bexhill Grand Prix, that will come to the Licensing and General Purposes Committee first, because it's obviously outside this policy. So the policy, as with the amendments suggested, does 99.9% of the events we're likely to deal with.
So can we then perhaps propose, or we're looking for somebody to propose and to second a resolution, but I think the feeling appears to be that first bullet point should come out and be replaced by orders will only be made if it's a non-profit making event, which we've already got, and that any amount of money carried over from the event is an amount deemed reasonable to support the continuation of the event in future years. Some form of words such as that. Is anyone prepared to propose something along those lines?
I propose that amendment, Chairman.
Happy to second that, Chair.
Can we then proceed to a vote?
Okay, councillors, I'll call your name out alphabetically. Please respond with for, against, abstain. Councillor Bird. Councillor Bird. Councillor Brown.
For.
Councillor Byrne.
For.
Councillor Coleman.
For.
Councillor Curtis.
For.
Councillor Field.
For.
Councillor Harmer.
For.
Councillor Madeley.
For.
Councillor Mear.
For.
Councillor Thomas.
For.
Councillor Tempe.
For.
That's carried.
Thank you. Yes, indeed. That is carried. Thank you, officers and councillors. That then brings us on to agenda item number 9, and this will be. Is this to be introduced by Mr. Johnson or by Mr. Bernard?
Chairman, I think I've drawn the straw on this one. Apologies for Maria Benford. She's not very well, unfortunately, so she can't be here tonight to introduce this as the author of the report. Just so the members understand, this is for your consideration tonight for negotiations with Unison and staff side. You're not actually making the decision on the pay award itself tonight. You're making a decision about what we go back to the union and staff side to negotiate on. So looking at paragraph 4 of the report, I think nationally, as you probably be aware, we are locally determined pay award. Is not part of the national negotiations that go on for local government. Nationally, the 2.75% increase that's been proposed, I think, is not been settled at, and therefore we'll probably be slightly ahead of the national settlement, whereas normally we are behind it because it's done for April each year. So we will probably be ahead of the national settlement. In terms of what's happened previously in 2018, we agreed a 2-year, 2% per annum deal, and that was approved by members. And in terms of inflation going forward, I think we're looking at very low inflation. I think as per the report, it was 0.9% in April, and clearly inflation is on a very downward pressure at the moment. Previous years, we've matched the living wage as defined by the Living Wage Foundation, as opposed to the government's national living wage. And we would recommend continuing to adopt that policy of maintaining it within the that definition for the national living wage as per the Wage Foundation. In terms of what we've put in the budget, when we set the budget for this financial year and for the financial forecasts, we've assumed a 2% increase in salaries. And therefore, if members depart from that, then obviously that may require further approvals by full council ultimately. And finding any expenditure beyond that would then require further savings to be made. And as members are aware, our financial position is difficult, and therefore we will definitely have to find the savings in order to keep a balanced budget and a balanced financial plan. So what we're recommending in here, in order to give staff some level of certainty in a very uncertain times, we are suggesting a 2% pay award, again a 2-year deal, so that those staff actually do have some level of certainty around their income over the next 2 years. And that's within the context clearly of a very uncertain national picture for local government, the delay in the spending review and the review of business rates as well. So that will give hopefully will give staff some comfort around the commitment of the council to increase their salaries beyond the actual, probably the inflation rate that will be over the next 2 years, I would imagine. Thank you, Chairman. Happy to answer any questions that members may have. Chairman, I think you're muted at the moment.
I am. Yes, I would ask councillors to put questions to Robin Venard first of all, and to listen to the answers and to come back with supplementaries if necessary. And we would then proceed to the general debate. So you will get a chance to speak more fully, but let's deal with questions first. Does any councillor wish to ask any question? At the moment, nobody's indicating. Councillor Byrne. Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just looking for clarification. At the top of the page, the recommendation, it be resolved that members' views are sought. So I'm not too sure if we're taking this recommendation forward to start to open the bidding, as it were, with staff side and the unions, at the same time as members are coming up with a resolution that they think is fair. We've had considerable discussion offline of this. So where exactly are we? Are we taking forward a proposal, or are we taking forward an initial bid with the fact underlined that members' views are still being sought, and that may not be the final bid?
Chairman, as I understand the process, Chairman, as I understand the process will be is that this is your views on the pay award for the next year, which we will take to Unison staff side. I think the issue will be if we do it within budget, then that can be decided as part of that discussion, as long as it is remains within budget. If it goes outside of budget, then that will have to be referred to full council for a decision. I don't know if Director Malcolm would be able to confirm that. I think that's the route it will go to.
Yeah, Chairman, just to clarify that this committee can decide on what it wants, as long providing it remains within the budgetary and policy framework of the council. We may go away and have a discussion with Unison staff side who say no, in which case we will have to go back, perhaps to this committee and then on to full council. If they say yes, then it will be then this committee can have determined that pay rise. So in effect, you've got authority to spend 2% of the budget on a pay rise, or the 2% that is in the budget, sorry, of the staff in Salway.
I hope that I think that clarifies the procedural matters, so that we can proceed to the substance. I'll then. Councillor Harmer would like to ask a question of Mr. Venard. Would you like to ask a question?
It's not really. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's not really a question. It's just to say that I would support a reasonably good pay rise. Naturally.
This is meant to be a question. Yeah, I'll come to address his.
It's not a question. Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Field, do you have a question? You're silent.
Yes. Unusual for me. Yes, I do really. The budget, the overall budget is to accommodate a 2% pay rise. I'm right, yes. Now within that budget, there's an element of pay rise that goes across the pay grades and an element of locally determined pay. Am I right? No?
No, Chairman, obviously, when we set the budget, we allowed for a 2% pay rise on the pay award. There's also, you might be referring to increments that people are entitled to within grades. So if a scale has a number of what they call spinal column points, people will rise through that grade depending on their performance. So this particular item is about the pay award itself, not about how people might progress through a grade,
yes,
their performance, if that's what you're referring to.
No, it wasn't. So every member of staff, every member of staff you're saying is on a pay grade.
Yes.
I thought that wasn't true, including the very most senior.
Yes, all our officers are on a pay grade.
So this council doesn't have any locally determined pay award?
It is a locally determined pay award based upon the grades that we have established for this authority. So we have grade 1 through to management grades, management grade 5. They are all agreed, and effectively once the pay award has been agreed, that will be reflected through all the pay grades. So each pay grade will be inflated. If you agree a 2% pay award, each pay grade will be inflated by 2%. And then within each pay grade, there's a number of what we call spinal column points, so progressions through a grade. Okay.
I think what I'm working towards saying is there any flexibility within that overall budget to vary the amount that the different pay grades get, because 2% on a very low salary isn't very much money, but 2% on a large salary is. And obviously we can't afford 2.75% across the board, but perhaps we could afford 2.75% at some grades and less commensurately at higher grades. I don't know.
Yeah. In the past, Chairman, we've actually increased lower grades, particularly lower grades 1 and 2, scale 1 and 2, by increasing their pay by a fixed amount as well as the percentage. But obviously the percentage, if you are to remain within the overall budget, the percentage applied to the majority of staff will probably be below the 2%.
But we could, if we wanted to.
You can vary it, yes.
Vary the lower grades at a cap of, say, I think in the past it's been £250, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to get that clear in my mind. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Johnston wishes to interject.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman, and apologies if I went away. It wasn't because of disinterest in the question, it was my internet connection. But just picking up on that, I mean, in the past, what we've done, our pay grades have been very good for us in that they have protected us against things like equal pay claims, etc., because what we can do is religiously associate every role with a pay grade. Councillor Field is quite correct that one of the disadvantages of percentage pay rises is that it does stretch those grades out further. And every so many years we put in a minimum amount, a given rise, but that must equate to a minimum amount of money. And if members were minded to do that, then they could do that. Can I also remind members that the grades we have difficulty recruiting on are at professional grade level, particularly, and at our lower grades we tend to pay at or slightly above our immediate neighbours. At our professional grades we actually pay slightly lower. Hence the recommendation that we wouldn't do the lump sum payment. So if you were looking for something, you may wish to go for a 1-year deal, but let's say that for next year you would wish the pay grades to be examined to do to look at something else that included a minimum sum. The options are yours to have. I'm not trying to direct you in a certain way, it's just that there are options. I think, but we need to be conscious that we are in a market for people and that we need to be able to attract people. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I think at that point I will probably move on to the general discussion. But to introduce that, I think the issues seem to me to be, first of all, we need to consider, should there be a pay rise? If so, what percentage of the existing wage bill? And we know that 2% is budgeted for. Should the If there is a rise, should it be for 1 year or for 2 years? Should be a flat rate for all staff or some other arrangement? And also, and I'm throwing this spanner into the works, councillors' allowances are currently linked. Should we freeze councillors' allowances, bearing in mind the difficult circumstances of councillors and the country as a whole? But I'm just throwing that in for discussion. Who would like to speak first? Councillor Hart.
Thank you. I do think it's important that we keep good staff morale, and I also think it's important that we attract talent and keep the staff. I'm not suggesting, throw the money away. I do also feel that it does need to be linked to members, because some members, it is an expense. You can't live off the allowance. And I just think it's fair that if some people choose not to have it, then donate it back. But I think, it should be across the board that some people feel uncomfortable not to say, yes, please, that would be helpful. It'll help me buy some more printing paper or all the other things that we can't claim for. And that's all I have to say. But I do think maybe 1 year might be a good idea, because we've got a COVID situation. But I do think staff do need a bit of security and a little bit of reassurance. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Field.
Yes, thank you. I agree with Councillor Harmer that we do need to reward our staff and they do need security. But I do think we are moving into very unknown circumstances at the moment, and we've got no idea what the MO of the council will be a year hence, and what the staffing will look like, because, we're just partially the way through a pandemic and it's had a massive effect on all of us. So I would propose, actually, this is only a 1 year deal and it can be reviewed root and branch in time for the next pay round.
Thank you. Councillor Coleman.
Thanks very much, Chair. I mean, first of all, I think it's worth noting how incredibly hard the staff have worked during this pandemic, far and above even the excellent work that they usually do. I think we've seen some examples of absolute. It's awe-inspiring. I think that the level of dedication to which the staff have shown during this pandemic, and I think the results are there in the fact that our community hub was one of the first to be set up and running. We've managed to keep on top of pretty much every bit of council business, and the district is still running successfully. I think we need to find a way of showing our appreciation to the staff for that, and also making sure that we provide them with a financial security as a result of the effort that they've put into keeping our district secure. Personally, if budget was not a concern, I would love to see a 2.75% increase across the board, if not more. However, I understand, as Robin said, that we do have this budget, and because of the current financial situation, it wouldn't be advisable to go above that budget necessarily, and we would have to find cuts elsewhere if we were to do so. So I would like to sort of suggest a compromise. Perhaps recommending 2.75%, but with a cap on the top end to keep us within budget. So it would be 2.75% up to an amount. And I do think, Chair, that we should freeze councillor allowances for this year, if nothing else, but as a gesture to our staff, that we will offer that saving that's made, which is not a massive saving, but it is a saving nonetheless, to increase that cap by a certain threshold. I think Malcolm wanted to interject.
Yes, Malcolm Johnson's interjecting.
I think Robin may have got in front of me, Chairman, so I will defer to Robin if I may. He was just in front, I think.
I'm not entirely sure, obviously, what Malcolm might be about to say, but just to give members an idea of what 2.75% increase would mean and where the cap would be. So that would increase staff probably up to scale 4 by that 2.75%, and thereafter they'll be capped at around £600 increase for the year. Just so you're aware of that. That then brings us back within the 200,000 overall budget. Sorry, now Malcolm, if you wanted to add something to that.
No, I mean, basically, just building on that a bit, the headline rise will not be 2.75% because the vast majority of staff will not get 2.75%. If members were minded to go that way, I would suggest you go for a lower percentage and a minimum amount, because then that is your true headline rate. And I would again remind members that it is the professional grades where we are struggling with. Now, I will also say, in slightly contradicting myself, part of the reason we're struggling is due to the availability of professional officers. There is a shortage of environmental health officers, planners nationally. So we need all the tools we have in our toolbox. But I would caution members against a overall headline percent and then a cap. What I would suggest is you do an overall headline with a minimum amount to people, if that's what you wish to do. And we last did that back in 2016, so it was 4 years ago that we last paid a minimum amount. So I wasn't going to propose it this year, but if members are minded that we do that this year, then we can look at a figure that meets that, if that's what members wish. Thank you, Chairman.
Can I just ask, when we're talking about scale 4, what kind of officers are we talking about at that level?
Chairman, you're talking about a variety of officers, but it's unfair to pick them on some, but most of our customer services advisors would be on scale 4. That would be a not untypical scale for them, scale 3 or 4. And where would planning officers and environmental health officers be? Much higher than that, Chairman. Much higher. Thank you. And they are the ones we find hard to recruit. Right. Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Chair. I think Malcolm had it absolutely right in that to essentially invert it, in that we talk about a minimum amount rather than a cap. That would seem to be a more, I suppose, agile way of achieving what we're trying to achieve. So I'd certainly welcome Councillor Coleman's views on that, and of course anybody else's. But it does seem the most agile way of doing it, whilst still allowing us to stay within the budget, which I think Robin Venant has shown us we've got to stay within that. So I think that could well achieve what we're trying to achieve.
Councillor Temple.
Yeah, you just said exactly. Thank you, Chair. That's exactly what I was going to say. It's essential we stay within the budget, and I think the cap, as Malcolm has suggested, would be a really good compromise. And I would definitely vote for that if it came up to the vote.
Thank you. And at this point, I'd like to call Councillor Vine Hall.
Thank you very much. I wasn't actually going to speak, but and I've really been listening in, and it's been a very good discussion. And I just wanted to put forward perhaps a suggestion for discussion by the members, and it really came about from Councillor Coleman's comment about perhaps not having an increase for members, which I think is a good idea. I think it really shows the approach of members. But what perhaps might be a creative consideration is taking that amount of money and dividing it equally by all officers. I'm not sure what that would add up to. Would it add up to about £100, £150 as a one-off discretionary payment as thank you for the work done during the COVID crisis? It may not be a large amount of money, but it is certainly to show that that we recognise the work done. It's just a suggestion, and I will leave on that moment.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I am not having it. Nobody else appears to be indicating at the moment. Nobody indicating. No further discussion. I'll take Malcolm Johnson first, and then Councillor Coleman.
I'm very happy to defer to Councillor Coleman if he wishes to go in first, Chairman. I mean, the only comment, if I may, that I was going to say is our members' allowances are not generous, and I mean it was designed that for those members who put in the hours, I would dread to think of what your hourly rate actually works out at. Now, it's not a payment for the job, and I entirely accept that. And one of the concerns and the reason why we linked it was some years ago when staff pay was frozen, members elected to have a pay rise, and it wasn't. Perhaps it didn't go down very well, but by doing it that way. So it was decided that the easiest way was to link members' allowances to staff pay. Then there could be no debate. But we can go back to the independent remuneration panel in future. And I think, I appreciate the gesture that members are making, and I don't wish to be ungrateful. But I would ask members just to remember that the allowances you pay, I suspect, just about cover you. And if you do a lot of work, they don't even come close to it. So what we don't want is to be discouraging people. I certainly don't think our allowances are such that we will have people knocking at our door to be standing just to get the allowance. But we do need to make sure that when they do stand, there is at least a recognition that they incur costs.
I appear to have lost Malcolm Johnson.
And those,
I don't know if the technical staff can assist at this point. I don't know if I'm being heard myself.
Chairman, it's Dr. Leonard here. Malcolm has had a few internet connection problems today. He'll log off and log back on again, so he may be back on now.
I can see him. Malcolm.
I don't know if you can hear me, Chairman.
I can hear you now, loud and clear. You've frozen again. Sorry. I'm sorry. I'll move on to Councillor Thomas. I'll move on to Councillor Thomas, and then Councillor Coleman. I've not forgotten Councillor Coleman. Councillor Thomas.
Chair, it's a very, very interesting discussion. I agree with Councillor Field. It should just be a 1 year, and I agree very much with the argument she's put, because the position is so uncertain. It would be unwise to actually go 2 years ahead. At the same time, I think there's a great deal to be said for the idea that we have got to consider as a priority the standard of service we provide. And an area in which we've had a particular difficulty in terms of providing a high quality service, arguably, is that of planning. And this is also an area in which we're having great problems in terms of recruiting people. And so I think that if we've got problems with recruiting planners, particularly at a time when we're actually launching an investigation into drawing up a new local plan, which is going to involve a great deal of work, particularly if those planners are also consulting very carefully with members of the planning committee, as we want them to do, I think it would be a great mistake, actually, to not have a financial inducement as great as we can in order to persuade planners to come here. I think it would be a grave mistake. I also think there's another point here, which is that we want to show that we are grateful for the work of all the members of the council, whatever their level, because tremendous efforts have been made by everybody at every single level of the council. And I think if we start discriminating between some staff and other staff, it might be interpreted that we're very grateful for the efforts of the people who are on some of the, inverted commas, lower tiers, and less grateful to people on some of the higher tiers. And I think that would be an extremely unfortunate message to send, because I think we want to say well done, thank you to every single member of the council. And therefore I would be in favour of actually having the same level of increase for all council members. So we're saying thank you, well done to all people at all levels. That would be my personal preference. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And now, now Councillor Coleman, please.
Thank you, Chair. To pick up on several points, and I think, was it Councillor Byrne actually requested my opinion directly as well, for what it's worth. On the point Malcolm was making about separating councillor allowances from staff pay rises, I can't see, surely there must be a way to just freeze the council allowance increase for a year, but continue going up the trajectory of the following years. And I say that as a 23-year-old self-employed carer for two, living in social housing who can only just about afford my rent. So the allowance does help me in some regard to get by. But nonetheless, I think as members we should be leading from the front on this, and in difficult financial situations we should be the ones to fall on our swords, so to speak, and we are getting by on our allowance at the moment, so I can't see why we shouldn't get by on the same allowance for another year. In terms of the caps and minimums, I can see some merit in the minimum, certainly, and I think it would still achieve what I would like to see, which is some financial security, especially for our lower paid members of staff, who are the ones that are going to be in real danger here. But of course, putting that minimum on still decreases the percentage for everybody else, in the same way that putting the cap on, the difference would be that the cap would ensure, whilst it has a maximum amount, it would ensure that those who don't get paid as much get the 2.75 or as close to it, but those with the biggest shoulders bear the greatest burden in terms of, I agree with Councillor Thomas that I am absolutely incredibly appreciative of our higher paid members of staff. However, because they are higher paid members of staff, they are going to be facing less uncertainty than our lower paid members of staff. And if it's a choice between one or the other, we have to protect those most at risk. That being said, could it, and I'm sure, I don't know if Robin will have these figures, I don't want to put him on the spot, Chair, but would it be possible to not 2.75, but a percentage somewhere between 2% and 2.75, where the cap would be high enough that it allows some very distinguished professional officers and staff to still get a financial reward, but also ensures that our lower paid members of staff are financially secure.
Chairman, I have done a little bit of modelling around options in terms of fixed allowance, fixed increases or whatever the proposal might be. And I think when I looked at, I think it was a 1.5% pay award across the board and a £200 effectively fixed addition, that would go up to an SO grade, but a PO1 grade and above. So a significant number of professional officers would then get a 1.5% award. So it would, if we were to try and deliver a fixed sum to all staff up to that senior officer, local senior officer grade, it's going to be somewhat less than £200 in order to remain within that overall budget that we have. So it may not be a significant sum, but to achieve even just to achieve that £200 would require a basic 1.5% pay award for all staff. So it's very tight margins between that we're playing with, and because of the number of staff and the grading, how the grading works across all staff, it is quite sensitive to changes in that fixed sum quite quickly. I think I did one proposal around £400 as a fixed sum for all staff up to LSO grade, and that worked out a 1% pay award as a general review. So it does change quite quickly if you start increasing that fixed sum significantly. So we are probably looking at maybe a 100 to 150 fixed sum in order to get some of the higher grades to a reasonable pay award for the year. So it is it's quite difficult, and you can come up with 101 different scenarios around this, but I think we can show that it's quite sensitive to that fixed sum being awarded to all grades. So we can play with it, we can come up with a proposal around that and take that to unison, but as I say, I think what it will result in is the overall pay award, particularly for middle and senior officers, would be somewhat less than 2% in order to achieve that.
Thank you, that explains it well. Councillor Field.
Thank you, and I'm 95% certain this is the last time I shall be speaking on this item. I came to this meeting very much of the Coleman train of thought. But the more I think about it, actually, the more I am inclined to think, and in fact, I think I will propose that we go with the 2%, but for 1 year, because so much is unknown. And I have to say, it has been my experience in recruiting people that pay isn't always the major determinant. And what we don't know is how we're going to be looking when COVID has settled down, when we've all adapted to new ways of working, and just what the shape of the organisation is going to be. So I would propose the 2% as itemised, but for 1 year, and with a promise to have a really thorough look at how we structure our pay from next year onwards. I would also say that all these pay options have been very interesting. I would have found it immensely useful to have had them written down before the meeting. I learn and understand visually as much as orally, and I do find it difficult listening to numbers being spelled out and thrown out at me. I mean, Robin knows what he's talking about, and I'm very grateful, but I would like to have seen it written down rather than just have to think about it on the hoof like this. So, as we are, 2%, 1 year only, proper review next year is my proposal.
Thank you. I will call Council Tempe, who I have been overlooking, and no disrespect meant at all.
None taken, Chairman, don't worry. Yeah, I was actually going to respond to Councillor Thomas's words, because in speaking with the Director of Planning, the real problem is the lack of people available. I feel sure that we have the discretion that if we actually do find someone willing to work with us, I'm sure there's discretion in the pay for some, somebody fantastic. So that's the point I'd make there. And also the members' allowance. Malcolm's quite right in that if you actually look at it as something that you do for money, you must be mad, because it's. I think I earn about 2p an hour, but that isn't why I do it. I do it because I believe in contributing to the overall community. I don't have an opinion either way about members' allowance. It's a overall savings of 4,000 across the board. It obviously is a very small amount, but I would agree with Sam that it would give a good feeling to the staff that we were doing it. But I would actually second Councillor Field's proposal, but I think also in the proposal there has to be something about members' allowance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Malcolm Johnson wishes to comment and may be able to help on the question of discretion when engaging new staff. I'm afraid he may have frozen again. He's back in the room.
I hope my internet will hold out, Chairman, so forgive. Our staff are paid at a grade, and we pay within that grade. The flexibility is within that grade. There's normally 3 or 4 increments, 2 or 3 increments. That's the flexibility. We've religiously stuck to that because that does protect us against equal pay claims and issues like that. So there is some flexibility, but limited. The point I was going to make, Chairman, is on members' allowance. You have a little bit of time to consider those because they're not paid until next year. So if you wish to get some information back on members' allowance, we could look at that. Bear in mind, they're also set by the Independent Remuneration Panel, who agreed that. So we may need to do some more work on that. But it's entirely up to members how they wish to play that. And really, that's a decision you need to take tonight. But my advice to you would be that we did link it because they were low, and like I said, it's not a salary; it's an allowance, and I think it is for those members who may need a bit of help to do their job. It is a bit of help, as Councillor Coleman said. It's certainly not a huge sort of. It's not going to make the difference between having a Caribbean cruise every year or something like that, or in that sense. So that would be. I would caution against it, just simply because we don't want to lose it. Because once you lose it, trying to get it back is very difficult. because without giving yourself then a massive increase in some year and then the ensuing publicity that can bring in doing that. Just my thoughts on it, Chairman. It's your call.
Thank you. I see that there are 3 councillors waiting to speak. I think we're beginning to crystallise the issues now and the views, but I call on Councillor Cortell. Councillor Cortell.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I agree with the general view that because we're in difficult financial circumstances, we need to just have this pay award for a single year, because we don't know the underlying financial position and what government grants might still be available to ease our financial pain. Secondly, I support the idea of freezing members' allowances for 1 year. Thirdly, however, I do support Councillor Coleman's view over having a slightly higher award for lower paid staff. And if 1.5% is a disincentive, then perhaps 1.75% at the for higher earners, to be able to award a little bit more to lower earners. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Thomas.
Can I first start by saying that I thoroughly support Councillor Field's recommendation of the 2% and Councillor Timpey's support for the same proposition. I think the arguments for it, I think, are very strong indeed. And obviously, Councillor Field has also made a very good case, an unanswerable case, for it being simply a 1 year thing. Can I comment on this business about councillors' allowances, however? I personally am not hugely dependent upon my allowance. I make a reasonable sum of money as a psychotherapist, and therefore I don't have an interest, if you like, in keeping up the councillor allowance. But something that has concerned me is that far too many councillors belong to my generation or the generation immediately below me, and not enough to the same generation as Councillor Coleman. And I think that something that would actually help us to recruit more people would be if in the future the allowances were such that it would compensate a young person, a much younger person than myself, for serving on the council. And thinking about it long term, I think if anything, councillors' allowances should be increased rather than the reverse. My strong feeling is we're not like members of parliament. We're not being paid vast sums of money for working an extremely small number of weeks in the year. Our position is very, very different. We work for nearly all of the year. They're very, very small sums of money. So if anything, I think it should go the other way. And I certainly don't think it would be right for us to make what we're after will be a gesture of which would make very, very little difference. So I'm all in favour of keeping the link between the salaries of the staff and the salaries of the councillors. And I think it also makes the point that we're all in it together. Councillors and officers, we're all, in a sense, working together for Rother. And that's one of the reasons why I would favour keeping the councillors' allowance in line with the salaries of officers, etc. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Drayson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Very much was going to support Councillor Field, but with Councillor Thomas just saying that, very much so, I was going to say we don't need to decide councillors' allowances tonight. As was pointed out, Mr. Johnson, we've got time. And in fact, Councillor Thomas has opened up a whole new vista in my brain about actually paying people who are working substitute wages and things, which need to be looked at in time. So I would say let's not even vote on allowances tonight. Let's do the pay deal, which we're being asked to do, and have a proper look at allowances at a later date before next April.
Thank you. I'll come back to Councillor Coleman, but I think we're probably getting somewhere near moving to a vote. So, Councillor Coleman.
I believe Councillor Byrne put his name before me, Chair.
Oh, I apologise. I'll take Councillor Byrne first.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Chair. Councillor Drayton really just shot my fox. Yes, the way in which we attract younger councillors does need to be looked at, and I think it's far more likely that something like paid childcare, equally the fact that we now have a lot more remote meetings would enfranchise a lot more people rather than having to come to a particular building. But that's, as Councillor Drayton says, that's something we should really look at tomorrow. And we could get bogged down if we try and look at that tonight. Basically, I'm now totally behind Councillor Field's position, a one-year deal, run with what we've got, but with a strong statement to unions, staff side and everybody that we are looking at ways of achieving flexibility and rewarding people at the lower end. But maybe it's a bit too complex to do right now, and the future is so uncertain that I think going with what we've got and allow for goodwill, allow it to be, hope it'll be received with goodwill, is probably the way forward.
And thank you. And that now, Sam Coleman, Councillor Coleman.
Thank you, Chair. I'm aware I've spoken quite a lot this evening, so thank you for giving me the grace to speak again and again and again. And I hope no one's too tired of hearing my voice. I'll try and keep it short. Firstly, I pray for a speedy recovery for Councillor Byrne's fox, who is apparently being shot by Councillor Drayson. I would on 2 points really. The first is if councillors are minded to start going towards Councillor Field's proposal of 2% across the board, then we absolutely must have a minimum threshold, a minimum amount, as Malcolm Johnson suggested. The problem, because otherwise the lower paid members of staff, in my view, are not going to get pittance. I don't know what that amount would be, because obviously it lowers the percentage for everybody else. But I think we must have a minimum amount of some description. The second point is, maybe this is a question to Robin. I don't know. Is there an amount that, I know it would have to go to full council, but is there an amount that we can raise the budget for this by that wouldn't affect services necessarily? So, for example, could it be 2.1% or 2.2%, or is there an amount? And finally, just before Robin answers that question, if possible, on the members' allowance point, and I know it's not directly linked to this, and I do agree that perhaps that shouldn't be something we vote on today. As throwing it into the ether, could there be some kind of discretionary pot established, which, if members wish, they can put a certain amount of their allowance into, which at the end of the year or at the end of a period or in a time of financial uncertainty could be divvied out to members of staff at the councillor's discretion? I don't know. Anyway, thank you, Chair.
It sounds complicated, but Robin Bernard, if you've got a comment on that.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Unfortunately, the budget is fixed at the 2%. I think to vary it in any shape or form above the 2% would then require you to go to full council for approval for additional funding, because ultimately that was the budget that was set by members back in February. So there's not a lot of flexibility, but obviously we're not projected to be in a position of having an underspend this year either. So if you did a 1 year deal for this year, you still couldn't accommodate it, because the council's effectively likely to be projected to be overspent by the end of the year. So there is very little flexibility for members to vary that without further approval on use of reserves, effectively to fund that for 1 year. And once you built it into base, it obviously there then becomes a future cost for council that it needs to meet each year. So I would urge against that as an option that members would wish to pursue, but clearly it is up to you, and if you wish to report this to full council for approval, then that's within your gift as well.
Thank you. I see that Councillor Tempe wishes to speak, and I think then I might be summing this up. So, Councillor Tempe.
Thank you, Chair. Just two things. If I'm correct, based on your figures, Robin, the amount available for the increase is 204,000, based on the 1% that you're saying it's 102. Is that correct?
That's the figures that are contained in the
Yes.
report. That actually
So-
did include the 4,000 for members as well. I just realised. So you've actually 200,000 spot on. So
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, I would definitely support Councillor Coleman's plea for some sort of manoeuvring of that money rather than across the board an amount, something towards the lower paid staff. And could we suggest that you actually look at that and then that's part of the proposal that we put forward. And also, I agree that we need to defer the members' allowance question, because I think there are lots of pros and cons to that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So I think in summary, I don't think anyone's really spoken against a pay rise for staff. There seems a general acknowledgement that staff have worked very well during this crisis and deserve a pay rise. At the same time, finances are stretched. We've budgeted for 2%, but a lot has happened since that budget was set. Consumer price inflation is very low at the moment and likely to remain low. But at the same time, we do need to attract good staff, and we are having difficulty recruiting, particularly at the professional grades. There's, I think, a general support for doing what we can for those on lower pay, but because of the way the numbers are split in staffing numbers, to do anything very much would mean that we wouldn't be giving very much to those in those very professional grades where we're having difficulty recruiting. So that's a very real practical problem. On the members' allowances, it seems that we don't have to decide tonight. There are many views being expressed, and I think that's something which might need further and deeper discussion. In terms of if we were to go for a particular percentage rise, say for example the 2% that's budgeted for, it would be far too complicated, I suspect, from what we've heard, too complicated to administer any radically new pay scheme, because we don't know enough and we haven't thought it through. But we would like to support the lower pay, I feel. Now, having summed that up, is anyone prepared to propose a form of words which we can adopt a motion? Do we have anyone willing to propose? Would Councillor Field, for example, put forward something fairly firm earlier on, which had some support, I felt?
I think we proposed and seconded, didn't we, Chairman?
Did we? I don't remember.
No, Chairman, can I just clarify at the moment there's no recommendations on the table that have been formally proposed and seconded. So you're quite right to call for a motion to be moved.
So would anyone like to propose? Councillor Field.
I did actually propose a definite proposition, which was seconded by Councillor Tempe. It's got kind of overlooked and adjusted since then, but it has been done. But I'm happy to abandon it and have a redraft, but I'm not going to do it.
I'm not asking you to redraft. Can we put that into words now? Councillor Field, can we put that into words?
The words I used were that we'd have a 1-year settlement of 2% across the board, with a promise for a root and branch review next year of how we structure our salaries.
And do I have a seconder for that?
Seconded.
I second that.
I'll take that as coming from Councillor Tempe, but there were several. So it is proposed that there be a 1-year settlement, and across the board 2%, with a promise of a full review during the course of the coming 12 months. And the last bit, I missed the last bit. What was the last bit, Councillor Field?
A full review of salaries, paying particular attention to how we pay our lower paid staff.
That was it. With yes, a full review of salaries during the course of the next 12 months, with particular regard to those on lower salaries. Can that motion now be put, please?
Chairman, can I just clarify, sorry to butt in without putting it on chat, can I just clarify that this committee would wish to consider the members' allowance at a future meeting for onward recommendation to full council, as also just adding that as part of the recommendations? Because I think that the view is that there are numerous views. We would want to do some work on members' allowances in other areas. So I think that would be a fair, if I may, a fair insertion for you to make as a further recommendation. Thank you, Chairman.
I see.
I'm happy with that, Chair.
Yes, yes. That should be incorporated in the wording. May we now take a vote, please?
Okay, councillors, I'll call your names out alphabetically. Please respond with for, against, abstain. Councillor Bird.
For.
Councillor Brown.
For.
Councillor Byrne.
For.
Councillor Coleman.
Abstain.
Councillor Curtis.
For.
Councillor Field.
For.
Councillor Harmer.
For.
Councillor Madeley.
For.
Councillor Mear.
For.
Councillor Thomas.
For.
Councillor Tempe.
For.
That's 10 for and 1 for abstain.
I declare that motion passed. Thank you, councillors. That was a very, and officers too, a very interesting discussion, and I think it could be very, very interesting to look more closely at our staffing structure and so on, and have those constructive discussions during the course of the next year. Thank you all very much indeed. That brings us on to agenda item number 10, which is for noting only, and unfortunately Maria Benford can't be with us tonight, but this is the Staffing Digest report covering employment relations, training, employment initiatives. And now, was it going to be Malcolm Johnson to speak to this? Yes, please.
Me, Chairman. Thank you very much. I mean, the information is very much in front of you. This is an annual report we put up, just giving you a feel for the what's happening throughout the year in the council. I think some of the highlights I'd wish to sort of to look for members or draw to members' attention are the apprenticeships that we have. Currently 6 apprentices working for us, which is I think is been something that they've brought a real value to the council and a real enthusiasm, and I think that is that's to their credit, and the fact that the scheme is available, so that's been good. Our turnover is around, well, it was 7.49 in the first 6 months, 5.71 for the latter 6 months. If anybody's going to ask me what a reasonable turnover is, I have really got no idea. 80% of your staff turning over is probably a bad thing. No turnover is equally probably a bad thing. Generally, somewhere in single figures isn't considered to be bad. So we have quite an extensive training programme for staff. We've lost, obviously, a number of the latter part of the year training programmes because of COVID-19, and you can see listed there are the number of courses staff have gone on. We're also members of the Sussex Training Consortium, which allows us to do a certain amount of training that might sort of, where we may not have enough people to do it in our own organisation, but taken collectively across all the councils in Sussex, we can get enough people. Health and safety is something we continue to focus on and will continue to focus on. It's been brought obviously to the fore in recent times with COVID-19 and the sort of response we've had to make to that. So, but that will be a continuing focus. Any accidents that we have had are investigated, and we continue to provide refresher training. I'm happy to take any questions and answer as best I can on the basis I'm not Maria, as you probably noticed, Chairman.
Yes, I've slightly lost my place on the list in the chat here. Is that Councillor Field wishing to speak first?
Yes, it is. Thank you. I really wanted to talk about mental health, and I see that some training has been undergone called dealing with mental health in the workplace, which is admirable because it's a real issue at all levels and all parts of society. Some councils have a person trained in every department or every office to spot colleagues with mental health issues and not to do the counselling, but to signpost them in the right direction on a sort of peer-to-peer basis. And I wondered if that's what this training that we're talking about here encompasses, because it seems to me to be a very good idea.
If I may, Chairman, yeah, up to a point, but I think Councillor Field makes a very valid point that one of the issues that some authorities are now looking at, in the same way that we have trained first aiders who look after physical health, you also have trained people who do the same for mental health issues. And if I may say, it's one of the disadvantages of the way we're working at the minute, in that bit where you see somebody and you say, is everything okay? Are you okay? We're missing. So we need to get things in place. So it's a very timely point, Councillor Field, that that we are taking action, and some of that course looks at that. But I think we need to look at doing more to make sure that we're actually covering it, because of the lockdown and because of the issues it's caused, the risk of mental health issues is much greater, and I think we need to be more aware to that. And there's always more we can do. And I do like the idea of this sort of first aid type approach, if I may call it that.
Thank you.
And Councillor Tempe.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Along those same lines, I was looking at the list, and there's about 113 delegates gone to things like fight and flight, stress, substance abuse, mental health, negative thoughts, etc. And it's a third of all the workshops dedicated to that. And I don't know if that's a reflection of the times or what, but I was just interested in the cost of these particular training sections that she's got here, and also whether STC, whether we pay for those as well. I imagine there's a budget.
Yeah, yes, Chairman. There's a total staff training budget which currently stands at £97,000 in a year. It's I mean, bear in mind that it has to cover all our staff, and sometimes training can cover from, I was going to say, a few pounds. You don't get much for a few pounds. If you consider, if a member of staff goes on a seminar to London, you're talking about 300 quid, 400 quid for half a day, upward. So it covers a wide range of things. One of the things we've done over the years with cuts is we've tried to protect the budget as much as we can, because I think, we talked earlier about the importance of salary, but also training and training opportunities are very important to people. And I think it's important we do give our staff that level of training. The Sussex Training Consortium, we've actually had very good value out of, mainly because of it's allowed us access to training that would probably have been very expensive, but we've been able to share the costs. That situation is constantly under review. It depends at any point in time. It's really very much demand driven, but we will continue to do that. But I think you're quite right to highlight that how much of our training is now going on, mental health, safety type issues, because often our staff who do the job are very proficient at doing their job, and that they know their job. They need refresher training. It's sometimes the bits that are ancillary to the job where we need to focus training on, and on personal development as well.
Thank you.
Could I just come back on that just quickly? The STC training, it says it's the CPD training for professions.
Yes.
So this is for certain levels of staff?
Yeah, it's certain staff who belong to professional institutes need to do a minimum amount of training every year to retain their membership.
CPD,
so,
yeah.
Because it's professional. Yeah.
Councillor Courtell. I'm sorry. Sorry, you're not finished.
No, I just noticed that there's just one delegate for managing your stress and mental health in the workplace. So that that would really reflect that the CPD people don't think they have any.
I couldn't possibly comment on that, Chairman, but I think that's probably just a reflection of time. I mean, a lot of people will have been wrapped up in the other courses on bits and pieces on that. So, yeah, it's a snapshot of it. It's not a snapshot. It's a year's cumulative figures, and bear in mind that we did start to lose courses at the latter part of the year.
Councillor Cortell.
I'd like to say that I'm very impressed with the emphasis within Rother Council training on psychological issues, on issues of mental health, dealing with mental health in the workplace, skills for managers, 15 delegates, dealing with customers with mental health issues and substance abuse and suicidal behaviour, 24 delegates, resilience and changes and stress at work, 9 delegates. It displays, I think, a visionary council, and I think just as training is great for members, I think this indicates that it's pretty good for officers as well.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Harmer. Councillor Harmer?
Yes, Paul, you made some really good points there regarding mental health. My question is, do you have such a thing rather as a social secretary or an organisation?
There are, Chairman, various events run through Unison staff side who will do things like that. Yeah, so that does happen. I think it's always a very difficult balance with that sort of thing, but there are social events that go on. I have to say, to be fair, a lot of them are arranged among departments anyway. So, yeah. So is there a formal social secretary? I can't say with hand on heart yes, but I do know events are organised.
I think it's worth looking at because training is vital and mental health is really scary. But I think a sense of belonging is important and a sense of community and unity. And if someone was to step up and take on that role to also include members, a whole variety of different things, you know, there'll be something for everyone. Not everyone will want to go out and on a wine picking tour or whatever have you. But they might like to go out for a beer down the front. But I think if someone were to take that role on, I think it'd soon generate an uplift within the organisation because you want to feel good when you're at work. You know, it breeds positivity and it increases productivity.
I by that, Chairman. Yeah.
Councillor Thomas.
Can I join in the general congratulations for this policy? It's an excellent policy. I'm sure we're all delighted to see it. I've just got a question about it. I mean, obviously, depression is a protected category, so to speak. So if somebody suffers from depression, the council has a legal obligation to look after that person carefully. But I think I'm right in saying the mental health legislation doesn't yet extend to all categories of mental health. So my question is about, if you have, for example, a problem with substance abuse or a problem with severe anxiety, you can be afraid to come forward and be honest about that, the fear of how it's going to affect your career. So I wonder if you'd like to make a few comments upon what Rother policies are to protect people who find it necessary to be honest about the difficulties they're facing. It would be very good to hear something about that, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Chairman, if I may, I would remind members that we have the Employment Advisory Service, which is a confidential service, which is also open to members. And we included members last year, where somebody can, we can refer, but people can go without our knowledge at all. All we get back from them, I believe, is a list of the hours that we're given. We don't get a list of people, and the feedback I get on that service is excellent. It's been very good from people who have chosen to tell me. I think the important bit is first of all, recognising it either in others and doing something about it. Like I said, our normal procedure would be to advise people they should, approach the Employment Advisory Service. If that isn't possible and they can't help, and we have had one or two occasions where they haven't been able to help, we have looked at other alternative sources to actually, and paid for other alternative sources, because as you rightly say, Councillor, the issue of mental health is it's an increasing emphasis. I don't necessarily know whether it's an increasing problem, but the emphasis is rightly increasing on it. And I think it is so vital to us as an organisation that we protect our staff, whether they be physically or mentally suffering in any way. So we have a number of cases, either through HR, through the Employment Advisory Service, or through alternatives. We have had, for example, some staff we're looking at bereavement counselling, things like that, and when things have happened where we've looked elsewhere for things. So there are a number of routes. Have we got it right all the time? I don't know is the short answer, but we are trying to learn from each time something happens and to move on from there.
Chair, can I just come back briefly, please?
Yes.
That's all that is very, very good to know, that there's an opportunity to have access to these services, and there is this very understanding attitude on the behalf of yourself and the other senior officers and the council generally in relation to these problems. But what I was asking about was more specifically written down policies that protect people who face some of these difficulties, because the reality may be that you've got somebody, let's say, whose work is being affected by an alcohol problem, but who don't necessarily want to come forward and admit that, but whose work is suffering. Now, I think what I'm asking about is, are there particular policies to protect people so they're not bullied or they're not picked upon because their work is suffering because of some kind of emotional problem? It could be, as you just mentioned, a bereavement, for example, which people haven't necessarily spoken about. So I'm curious about particular policies to protect people who are suffering in these ways, and particular policies that are kind of written down. This is the council's policy on people who have mental health problems. Could you just say a little bit more about that, please?
Yeah, in short, is there a policy for every eventuality? No, there probably isn't. But there are broad overarching policies. Now, for instance, if somebody is proposing disciplinary action, the reason we get HR involved is so that we can make sure that is being dealt with in accordance with our policies, so that if there are underlying issues, we're picking up those underlying issues and we're not treating the symptoms. What we should be doing is looking at the cause of if there's poor performance, it's about getting to the bottom of what's causing it, and then what we can do to help the individual see that through. So we have things like our performance management program isn't just about beating people with a big stick. And for the avoidance of any doubt, we don't beat anybody with a big stick. It is physically, it's about developing people and actually putting measures in place to actually improve performance, because ultimately that's what we want all the time. We don't want to be sort of penalising people. We want to be encouraging them. We want to be bringing our staff along. We appointed them because they were the right person for the job, and we should develop them and help them develop. If there are gaps in our policy, Councillor, I can assure you that once we become aware of them, we fill them as quickly as we can and make sure there's specific reference. But in our disability policy, we will make reference to all the protected issues that are listed there. So there's no doubt more we can do. I would not suggest for a minute we're doing absolutely everything. We are striving to do everything, and if we miss something out, it will be included and it will be incorporated.
Can I just say thank you very much for that very heartening, progressive and humane statement there. That's so great. Thank you, sir. Cheers.
Yes, and indeed, yes, I would endorse that too. Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Chair. Being of the age I am, I think this is one of the things that got lost when personnel became human resources. All too often, when something as nebulous as the way people feel about the way they're working and the way they feel about their colleagues, that suddenly has to be codified within a particular strategy, or a particular protocol has to swing into place. And in the same way as Malcolm was saying about we train first aiders, to have someone who is identified as being an empathetic sort of person, who can link to HR without necessarily invoking some HR procedure, I think that would be very, very good. Picking up Councillor Tempie's point earlier, and this is probably the same people, when we send someone on training course, often what you do is train a trainer. You send someone that you know, A, will take full advantage of the training, B, has the skills to disseminate that training throughout the organisation. Now, it strikes me that the sort of training that shows people how to cope with stress, how to recognise stress-related or substance-related problems, that sort of person would be very good, first of all, at essentially disseminating that training to their colleagues, but equally being, if you like, the sort of mental health first aider for that group. So I know it's all a bit touchy-feely and it's difficult to nail down, but I feel if we could foster that sort of culture within our organisation, and maybe picking the people we send on the training courses, encouraging them to disseminate the information. There might be a budgetary implication there. It might not cost us so much for so many delegates, but equally identifying people with those people skills and showing them they're really valuable. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I'll come straight on to Councillor Coleman. Again, I think we're nearing the end, but Councillor Coleman.
Thank you, Chair. Me again. Firstly, I concur with what everyone's been saying. I think it's great that with this sort of training for staff, we both provide an escalator to help them increase their abilities and do the best job they can, but also provide a harness and a cradle in terms of the sort of mental health training to make sure that they're supported and looked after. And I think it's very clear from both this and the previous discussions that we really do value our staff here at Rother District Council. I've got 2 points really, Chair. The first one is in the same way that members training is often fed in towards to staff, and staff benefit from some member training. Could it be that when delegates return from staff training that they can in some way disseminate that information to members as well? Because whilst not all of it is necessarily relevant to what we do day to day, it's very useful to, you know, broaden our knowledge as well. And the second point I was going to make is if it was possible to look in the future towards training around equalities, specifically around, for example, I'm presuming that a lot of staff wouldn't necessarily know every LGBTQIAA plus, and it's not something to laugh at necessarily, Councillor Byrne, because they have, you know, very valid identities, and I think it would pay for members of staff to understand those sort of developing aspects of equalities stuff, and also in terms of like BAME issues, especially given the current climate. I think it'd just be very good for staff to have an equalities training session at some point to make sure they're all up to date in terms of that, and it would be great if members could benefit from that as well. Thank you.
Well, thank you all very much. I think perhaps give the last word to Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't laughing at the multiplicity of terminology that we use now to describe human behaviour. I think we all realise there's a whole spectrum of human behaviour, and when you try and give it a particular it's like sort of blood groups. When you try and codify it to that extent, it does become in some terms laughable. However, the way in which we've all got to make room for each other is very, very important. And yes, I believe equalities training, appreciating differences, and that whether it's with the BAME community, the gay community, whatever gender epithet you tend to you care to adopt for yourself, I don't think they matter. It's the overall inclusive attitude and the willingness to accept other points of view. So I'm sorry if I laughed, Sam, but it just has got ridiculous in my mind, the way we try to codify what is in fact a vast range of human experience, and it just doesn't go to try and codify it by letters.
Well, yes. Yeah. Well, I don't know if we're agreeing to disagree on that or what. Councillor Coleman, would you like to come back on that? Because I'd like to end on a high note if we possibly can. It's something we're all agreed on and pleased about.
Yes, I mean, I perhaps disagree with Councillor Byrne on the sort of futility of it. I think it's very important to allow people to identify how they choose, because that then helps them to exist in life freely without persecution. But I think Councillor Byrne's broader point and the intention behind what he was saying was that we should respect differences and that we should treat everybody equally and equitably. And I think that's a wonderful message to take forward, Chair. And if anything, further proof that training is always a good thing.
Yes, I think that is a high note on which to end, and I think one on which we can all agree. And I would say myself, looking down the list of courses and training and so on, that I just wish that I'd had half of that when I was working in an office. And I've spoken to officers informally, and they speak very highly of what is on offer and how it's done. And I'm sure it's a major part of why they work here, why they're pleased to work here, and a great incentive to retain and to recruit staff, knowing that this sort of training and kindly treatment is available. And I hope now I am able to bring this meeting to a close. Yes, I formally.
Chairman, just sorry, before you bring it's just although the reports for noting, you won't be taking a roll call unless anybody objects to it. So on the basis of no objections to that, then please feel free to close the meeting.
If you have any objections, speak now or forever hold your peace. There are no objections, and I formally bring this meeting to a close. Thank you all, councillors. Thank you, officers.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you for your chairmanship, Andrew.